Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamualaikum. Ji ayanu pakhair agale ni hao chunashumme washmale. Ohio Gonzaimes, Guten Morgen, hola, bonjour, privyet, kaifa hal? Hale shuma chatore, ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba. Buna, mucho gracias, Swami of Balika Reaya, Hosh Garden, and Ayo Sayo, Huyamora, Chivato, Chihaljot, Kalimera, Khairutan, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV World and are watching World this morning alongside my very well learned colleague who happens to be Miss Hajar Satti. I happen to be Shahzad Hassan Khan, and we hope and pray that everybody out there is doing wonderfully well and that you're ready to kickstart your day with us. But first things first, hello Hajra, Assalamu alaikum. How are you feeling today?
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for introducing me. And as always, the weather is very confusing. One day it's very hot and then other day it's very cold. So it's blowing hot and cold. And I mean, obviously it's Islamabad and we are enjoying the beauty of the spring season. And you will witness that in lots of housing societies, so they are holding this spring competition where they're having these beautiful flowers. And this is the beauty of Islamabad, where you get to witness the blooming flowers, the different shades of trees, whether it's crimson color trees or whether it's green color trees, and spring always symbolizes the arrival of something new, the new beginnings, or the newness in the nature and the beauty of that. And it's very beautiful and amazing that how we can relate to it, because again, when we talk about nature, when we talk about us, we're all part of the bigger something bigger. And I think it's a human feeling that we want to have the sense of belonging and we want to have a sense of oneness, and it's very natural to us because again, we are born on the fitra, we are born on the divine imprint, and it's very easy for us, especially for our brain, for our soul and for our hearts to believe in a bigger creator or in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or higher power and whatever you name it, but there's someone out there who's looking out at
Exactly. And you know, where you actually spoke about, you know, that it's the divine mantra, you know, I think that's how I will put it as well. But you know, there are other things as well. So imagine that, you know, even if our religion tells us that you really need to educate yourself or gain knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, how many times do we see people getting quality education is something that happens to be a question, unfortunately. But then we do have people who actually join hands. Now imagine that with the cooperation of the government of Pakistan and the government of Turkey, a Pak-Turk school actually conducted all over the country, almost in 20 different cities, admission exams for more than 3,500 students from grade 4th till 9th. And not just that, for their GCSEs as well. And you know, it's a multiple tier examination, and the sole purpose is to provide quality education to the children of Pakistan as well. So Pak-Turk School, you know, thank you so much for doing so as well. They're offering scholarships. They want to empower women education. So I think that, you know, this is something which really needs to be appreciated, because it will be beneficial for all of those children who unfortunately cannot afford quality education. So hats off to them as well, and for all of those schools who are actually doing such activities. But not just that, there are other activities which we might not like.
Of course, and like Shahzad alluded to this fact that we are well aware of the modern form of the slavery that still exists inside our globe, and obviously there are lots of conversation, there are lots of discourses, there are lots of conferences, there are lots of rhetoric that is being held to talk about that and to eradicate the menace of this modern day slavery. So in what forms does this slavery manifest? We are going to develop this conversation in the next segment, but before that, I would like to share some of the statistics that I gathered from the International Labour Organization, which they held in 2016. So human trafficking is a $150 billion industry globally, which is such a huge amount of the number. And we see that I mean, every day there's so many people who in search of better life, who in search of better living standards, they cross the borders. Sometimes at the hands of the agents, they are exploited a lot, and then they go across the continents, and there they are entrapped in the modern day slavery. So according to the ILO, 40.3 million people are victimized in the modern day slavery, and also 29 million are women. So that's a very staggering figure. And again, 5 million are forced into the sexual exploitation globally, and children account 20% of this entire matrix. And of course, 15.4 million are the forced marriages, which we also consider under the modern form of the slavery, because something which is against your freedom, against your agency, is again a slavery, because we were talking about, you know, how we have eradicated the slavery, but it still exists, and in the modern connotation, what are the connotations of that, and how our women voices, they're that should be present inside this entire discourse. We are going to discuss about that, and obviously more important it is that how we can take care of the victims who fall part in this vicious cycle of the modern day slavery, of the exploitation, how to accommodate them, and how to make sure that they have a healthy living style, which every global citizen should have.
So, Hajar, 4 basic steps. Obviously, we as Pakistanis, what can we do? Because for me, it was very surprising, shocking to hear, and because this was brought to my information by this amazing gentleman who's with us today as well, that that when we talk about trafficking in persons, it's not just cross-border. It's within as well. So bonded labor, child abuse, and with women, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, this amazing conference that's taking place over here in the country, I think it's going to shape and change a lot of mindsets as well, and what people need to do, what the government needs to do, the law enforcement agencies, the judiciary, so everybody needs to play their role. And to kind of talk about this, ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that to talk about Pakistan's perspective, we have been joined by somebody who happens to be the founding director of SSDO. He is Mr. Syed Kausar Abbas. Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning. How are you feeling today?
Thank you very much, Jeet. I'm feeling good, and I hope you are doing.
So we might be talking about trafficking in person, and it's a very sensitive topic. But you're on a morning show, you can smile a little bit. That's all right. Thank you so much. Alongside Syed Kausar Abbas, we're very lucky that we've actually been joined by a survivor herself. She happens to be a visionary leader, a resilient leader, an entrepreneur herself. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that we have been joined by Miss Ansa Noreen. Hello, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining us, Superwoman.
Thank you so very much, Hajra. Lovely to be here and share, whatever I can to educate people and to help them in their journey,
And I think we need to add more credentials to her very beautiful, I would say, struggle. She's also the founder of the Empowerment Square. So we are going to talk about women voices, how to accommodate them, and how to make sure that we rehabilitate all of those victims who fall into this very vicious cycle or circle of modern day slavery. And like Shahzad mentioned, we have the bonded slavery here. We also have the children who are working there. They should be in the schools, not out. They're working there. But also,
and very, very quickly, before we introduce ladies and gentlemen, so imagine that this sort of a gentleman, if he knocks on your door, you're in trouble. I think that's something that everybody needs to know. He's a law enforcement agency expert, has been working with them for 30 or more years. He's here in the country to share his own experiences and how they kind of figure it out and how they make sure that to go against those mafias as well. We're very lucky that we have been joined by the TFP expert himself. He happens to be Joseph Salaveria. Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning. How are you feeling today?
Assalamu alaikum, good morning to you as well. I'm very happy to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you over here. So, Kausar, let's get the conversation started. We've shared the International Labour Organization statistics as well. What's happening? What is the conference all about? And when we are to speak about trafficking in persons context, how is Pakistan doing? Do you think that we're somewhere good or somewhere in the middle, or we need to do quite a lot?
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm really grateful to you people for highlighting this issue once again after a year, because we conducted the same show last year as well. So basically, trafficking in person is one of the major issue in Pakistan now, because Pakistan has the binding to submit annual tip report to the US State Department, and now this is also the part of GSP Plus as well. We have to submit another report to EU as well
to get the GSP Plus status.
Yeah, and on other side, it's a human rights issue as well. So it's like one of the important things that if any individual is being exploited. So there are like two different things. One is the within the border of Pakistan, the trafficking happening within the country, and the other one is the cross-border, that is basically a smuggling, and it could be converted into trafficking when exploitation of the person started in the cross-border.
So just because we might not be very well aware and we go out in 46 different countries, so to kind of, to getting to know what trafficking is within the borders, that's something we might not have heard before as well. So, and what sort of a phenomenon is referred to that?
Okay, basically, if we talk in the legal terminology, the 2018 law clearly states that the compelled or bonded labor and the commercial sex or the prostitution or the sexual exploitation is basically a trafficking in person. And in case of women and children, the punishment is like 10 years. And in case of a man, it's like 7 years. So
when you force it onto someone, or if you're doing it willingly?
By force or a coercion. In trafficking, basically, it's not a kind of even the movement is not important in trafficking. Like it can happen within even under one roof. People consider it like the movement is important for the trafficking, but it is not important. It can happen anywhere. Like recently, there was a case. First, I'll talk about the performance of the government. Yes, government has made the two different laws in 2018, the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act 2018, which deals with the internal trafficking, and now it's the mandate of police that we have to educate the people that you don't need to go to FIA for reporting the internal trafficking. If you are being sexually exploited, if you are being trapped by for the forced labor, for the organ trafficking, for drug trafficking, you can like simply report to the police, and police is bound to register FIR under Section 3 of Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act 2018. Yeah. So the government of Pakistan has made the legislation in 2018, and now every stakeholder is like actively working through civil society, like SSDO is working and many other organizations, players who are basically trying to bridge the gap and develop the interdepartmental coordination mechanism, because it's not a one department responsibility. If police is like reporting the case, the social welfare have to give the services to the victim who is being trafficked. So the FIA.
How do we identify whether the victim's saying the truth or not? I think that's the core issue as well.
If somebody is coming and reporting the trafficking case that I am being trafficked, a police cannot be a judgmental.
True.
Because it's the right of everyone to to report it. After that, there is a complete investigation and all that, and after that they'll be, of course,
which is why I'm going to move on to Joseph now. I think that's where you will share your expertise, because imagine what happens is that most of the time, for all of those people who are involved in such heinous crimes, will hide behind the law, because the law will actually kind of one way or the other, they will twist it, they will use their whatever facility that they have to themselves, or probably advocates of the High Court and Supreme Court, to make sure that they do not get caught as well. How do you think that people over here who are working against trafficking really need to work and be smart to use the law in their favor?
Or do you believe that there are leakages in the legal system which they can exploit in the first place?
So from the perspective of experience, from having worked these types of cases in many different countries, this is not just specific in terms of the problem being chronic to Pakistan. This is something that is very prevalent in many different countries. To that point, to the question you asked about the justice system and how the individuals who perpetrate these acts can find ways to either circumvent or abuse the system to some extent, there are always those types of problems that come up when we work these kinds of investigations. And this is why, to a point that you had made earlier when we were discussing some of this, is the need for type of collaborative efforts, not just on the level of law enforcement and investigators, but also from the aspect of prosecutors and the judiciary, to be fully aware of the scope of the crime, how it impacts not just the society, but more to the point of the victims themselves that are being subjected to this. And having a very full understanding of what it is that's actually transpiring. And to Kosar's point that he made in terms of there's still some misconceptions, even though there's been many decades now of emphasis on trying to combat this crime around the world. There's still a lot of misunderstanding with the crime of trafficking itself, and many people still kind of think there's a movement aspect related to it.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from a different perspective and a different lens, when we're referring to trafficking, it's less about movement and it's more about these individuals who carry out these acts. They look at the human beings that they subject to this as more of a commodity, as a commerce. Okay,
as a part of their business.
As a part of their business. Excellent. That's an excellent way to relate to it, or to put it into perspective. It's a commerce to them, and in a different way, or in a similar fashion to say commerce that involves some other type of produce, whether it's lumber, whether it's something in manufacturing, right, or even if it's an illicit commerce like drugs. Those aspects, those elements, those things, those materials, they're replenishable.
True.
Right.
With respect to trafficking, the commerce of the victim is reusable. It's the same individual that's used again and again for these traffickers to be able to carry out these acts for the sole purpose primarily of making some kind of money for themselves.
And these are very dark dynamics, and I would further like to build the conversation on that. And Ms. Hansa, now I move to you. So like Joseph mentioned that they are being used as a commodity, and you cannot delineate the element of money that is involved, right? And like I mentioned, according to ILO, $150 billion of industry it is, right? So how can we delineate the money, and how can we make sure that we work with the victims, and especially you working with the rehabilitation and the care of the victims? So far, how has been your journey, and what are your experiences that you would like to share?
Sure. Thank you so much, Hajra, for such a wonderful, thoughtful question, which is very relevant to the work that I'm doing and I'm very passionate about. So there are two aspects of it, the way I see it. It's not just, it definitely is a money-driven industry, but it also is more about the control of one human being over the other human being, right? Taking away their will, their freedom, and
manipulating them, yes.
Exactly. And the way I work, because I have been through that entire journey, and when I going back a little bit to my backstory to this, I got married to this man, and at the time, I'm not a naive person, but still I could not see what is happening with me and who that person is. I was educated, mature woman who was professionally very sound. My background is fashion and textile. I've worked here in Pakistan for the longest time in fashion and textile industry, living in Lahore, mother of a child, did not know that what is happening with me, what the intentions of the person is who is, quote unquote, trying to, get married and promising a wonderful, beautiful life to me, and I ended up being a victim of human trafficking. And going through that entire experience has taught me that we have to be very vigilant, especially as women and girls, and we need more education and awareness, not just in the traditional sense of education, but also getting to know what is happening in the world.
But then again, marriage is a very tricky sort of a question, right? And it requires a social diligence which is not present in everyone, right? And especially in our society where we have a very strong sort of a communitarian system where our parents' wishes, we take it and we lineate them with the honor, right?
Exactly.
So if you are not doing it, so it might not, you're not honoring them, and that is not taken a very good thing, a very morally respectful thing, right?
And then, so that kind of directs that, unfortunately, that you're being pushed by your parents towards being subjected to trafficking in persons, right? That's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Now imagine that we're so far away that even today, even me and Hajraj, okay, so I'll speak about myself, that we didn't knew that, that trafficking will exist in such forms as well.
True.
Now for you to say that, you were in a marriage, you had a child,
yes,
you thought it's going to be a beautiful life, and you never knew that you were being subjected to that.
Exactly.
So can you explain it to people today that, what was actually happening?
Of course, absolutely, and that is my point, and just mainly for that reason, because nobody's really talking about the aspect of fraudulent marriages, as a form of trafficking.
Yeah.
Because our society is built around those norms, those values, which are wonderful, we have been doing really great because of that society and the values. But the thing is, people are seeing and exploiting that, like the traffickers, they are making money out of it. And as I said earlier, that is the case, especially with me and more girls with me that I work with. So in my organization in New York City, works with women from all over the world. And I encounter so many cases, especially from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. And these women, they are promised beautiful, wonderful fairy tale life in developed countries. And people here, I'm sure you are aware, they would do everything though.
So what happened when you went to New York?
So when I went to New York, I saw the situation that, to be very honest, I wasn't even sure that there is a word, human trafficking. I did not know, like trafficking for me, it was always, related to the drugs or other, weaponry and things like that. I did not know that human trafficking is a word. I thought it is a domestic abuse by your partner. That's all I called the whole time. When I got out of that situation and I reached to the police and I said, like, I'm going through domestic abuse, okay? They connected me with the resources, and that is really wonderful, and I really would love for Pakistan to have similar system where, if you go to the police, they are able to identify you without you having to know like what form of abuse I'm going through. They know the resources, they know the system, everything is interconnected, so they know where to refer the
Would you have to give like an evidence or provide them with something solid that they can build a case on or something of that sort?
Absolutely, and that happens as the process goes on, right? In the beginning, you just reach out to them and you ask for the help, and then they connect you with the relevant service providers and the agencies, and they investigate. And once they investigate, they have to make sure that, okay, the story and the evidence, they're the you're telling the truth, basically.
Exactly.
Right?
And you know, so I'm very sorry, but I'm going to connect this with this because the world knows this as well.
Right,
So
right.
imagine that, you know, the very infamous Johnny Depp case, which was all over and everybody spoke about it, and it was about domestic abuse and whatnot. Now imagine from where this story started, Joseph, this is a question for you too as well. It looked like as if it was Johnny Depp, you know, who really needs to be sorted as a human, and that he was abusing on his wife and whatnot. But imagine after months and months of trial, we figured it out that it wasn't really Johnny Depp, it was the other person accusing the other person
Amber Heard, yeah.
of such a heinous crime. Now, in such situations, how strong do you think that a judiciary needs to be in making sure that everything that they're going to figure out will be based on evidence? Or is it important?
No, it's tremendously important. But from the standpoint of the judiciary, because they are a body of impartiality, they make decisions, and depending on the country's justice system, if it's a tribunal, if it's a court of judges making the decision, or if it's a system where there's a jury of citizens.
Yep.
In either instance, the body of the judiciary is impartial, so they can only decide based upon the facts and
True.
the evidence that are brought before them.
True.
So the responsibility of trying to ascertain the truthfulness, the accuracy of what it is that was put together to be presented in court falls upon law enforcement, the investigators, and the prosecutors,
All
right? In conjunction with, in the instances of trafficking investigations, such as forced labor or sexual exploitation, the non-government organizations that provide a lot of assistance to these victims. All of us, when we're dealing with these types of cases, our first instinct is always to want to understand and have some empathy for the person we're dealing with,
True.
that we're trying to learn their story. We want them to feel, to some extent, comfortable enough to share what happened to them. Because it's not only from that, but in a majority of the circumstances, we rely upon their ability to share their story so that we can go forward and start to
And look for it.
collaborate, to corroborate factually, from an investigative standpoint, what it is they said. And it's that level of corroboration that is able to prove in a court that this factually happened.
Obviously,
And-
so it
and
needs to be like
obviously,
that. And Hajra, very
right.
sorry, I need to connect this with that and then move on to Qasas Saab over. Now, Qasas Saab, imagine, because I think he's correct, imagine that, you know, over here, unfortunately, there's financial moral corruption. Unfortunately, there are people who actually live on this or within those circumstances where they
Right.
certainly cannot speak, say a word. You know, and unfortunately, there are people
And
you know,
again,
who might not even go to the court, you know, to kind of find justice for themselves.
And just to develop on this conversation, because I would like to connect it. So legally we are protected, right? So Kausar mentioned about an amazing law that we have here in Pakistan. But then again, we see that this modern day or modern form of slavery still exists, right? So we see lots of young kids who should be in their schools, who should be in their classes studying there, but they are doing, and they're very menial jobs, and especially the one who are in the bonded slavery, especially in the brick kilns and whatnot, that still exists, you know, and underground it is still happening, right? So there was a massive crackdown, but I think so not every time. So there are leakages in the system, right? So what is the situation on the ground in Pakistan? Because every other day we see that, you know, cases of kids getting exploited at the hands of their, owners or you know, the homes that they're
Handlers.
working there. Yes. So what is going on inside the Pakistan?
So, you know, basically all this activity or a crime is called, it's basically an organized crime. It's not a
Yes,
one-man
yes.
thing. Basically, there are different mafias who, one is the recruiter, the other one is basically the exploiter, the other one is basically further promoting that business. So, there are a number of people who are basically linked in exploitation of children, in exploitation of the women, in exploitation of the men, even the transgender as well. So recently, I would just like to highlight two cases here. The Rizwana case, which
Yes,
was
yes.
you know, very much highlighted on the social media as well. On the day one, in the initial days, it was not that much highlighted, so it was not even discussed by the, you know, our court system and our police system and all the relevant agencies. So we, as a civil society organization, we took this initiative to reach to the hospital to Rizwana. We highlighted this issue that this is purely a child trafficking case. We took the Punjab Child Protection Bureau on board and we started a massive campaign. We took all the relevant stakeholders, celebrities, we engaged them in the campaign. Similarly with the Fatma Fariro case in Sindh.
Yep.
So Rizwana's case, Child Protection Bureau.
How do you make
Punjab,
sure your organization that it's not an agenda-based action, whatever action that you're taking against anyone?
Because we are not, we are basically working on this social issue.
I'm very sorry, but the sole purpose of posing this question is that I've seen a lot of people being tried just unfortunately for domestic abuse, and I've seen such organizations stepping up to kind of put pressure, onto the people who are actually handling that case as well. I've seen, unfortunately, all of these organizations being mishandled or misguided by people because there was an agenda at the back of it. How do you make sure?
Basically, if any child is being abused, if any women is being abused, of course, it could not be the agenda of anyone.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is just to put pressure on judiciary or also of law enforcement agencies. We do see such organizations with placards outside courts, do this, do that, and whatnot. So it's more of raising their voices.
Organization, we are just providing assistance to the all the relevant institutions.
So are your checks in place for that?
Yes.
Do you make sure that whatever you go?
Yes, because we have MOU with all the relevant agencies.
MOU is fine, but what checks do you have in place?
I think what Shehzad is trying to mention here is that obviously when you're working with the international organizations, so there develops a sort of a distrust, especially in the third world countries, because people are generally not very receptive about these organizations, and they have this myth, or I would say a fear that someone is supporting them, so they might not be so open and receptive about coming to them, right? So how do you address that?
That's what I'm saying. Basically, we have MOUs with all the relevant government departments of Pakistan, and they know our work, and they are very closely involved in all our activities. Even in this conference, you will see that every stakeholder of Pakistan is in our conference.
Wonderful.
And they're talking about the issue of trafficking in person. 2-3 years ago, when we started working on this, even the people were not accepting this issue, that this is not our job, this is the job of FIA only, this is not the job of police, this is not the job of Labor Department. But now you come and see any activity that people have started talking about this. True. Now cases are being registered now, and Pakistani.
You're on Pakistan television. Hey, good morning.
Pakistan television is also doing this. And the other thing is that FIA is the lead agency on in the coordination of all the police and all the departments, and they are doing an amazing work. Child Protection Bureau, they are doing an amazing work. The case of Rizwana, this is one of the major example in this issue. She is survivor now, and now she is shifted to the Punjab government's Child Protection Bureau.
Alhamdulillah.
They are basically
and we would certainly want to appreciate that as well. But thank you so much for joining us. Wonderful to be in conversation with you all to speak about such an important issue. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that we had such awareness before this show as well. So thank you so much. Each one of you have contributed to the cause, and that's what our role is. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you be very vigilant with what role you really need to play in your society in making sure that it's safe, secure, and that nobody's being pressurized. There's no domestic abuse, there's no child abuse, there's no bonded labor. Each and every one of us needs to keep an eye out. It's like a neighborhood watch. Good morning. We're heading out towards a short break.
Welcome back, and before going on to the break, we talked about that we are going to develop some very interesting conversation, and this is the conversation that we keep having, and we want to have it more because this is the topic and something, I think, an epidemic that is across the world. So when we talk about the mental illnesses that are on the rise, why are those sort of the mental illnesses that we are witnessing, and especially in a lot of young people, you see the prevalence of anxiety disorders and depression. And obviously one of the thing that really catches my attention, because I have seen it happening especially in my surroundings, in my environment, we would like to also touch upon the narcissist personality disorder, because nowadays we feel that society sort of rewards the narcissism. So they appear to be very confident, they appear to be very charming, they are very successful professional lives, and then again we see that there are lots of personalities, especially in the Hollywood, maybe in the entertainment industry, or maybe in the politics, where we label the narcissism. So, and why do we label it? What exactly is the narcissism? How we can contemplate over that, and how we can have a more supportive system to tackle this particular issue. We are very glad that we have been joined by someone who happens to be a clinical psychologist. She is also a psychotherapist. We are very glad that we have been joined by Ms. Huria Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you for calling me.
Yeah, so Ms. Huria, I talked about the narcissism. So can we talk about the narcissist personality disorder and how it is rewarded in in the modern day society?
अच्छा, all right. First thing is that जिनको narcissistic personality disorder है, वो individual
I'm
जो
really
है,
sorry to interject here, but we are in English channel, so if I would
definitely we can talk in English only. Then
you so
all
much.
right. Achha, so the first thing that I would like to mention is that the approach that they have is possibly this, that it's my way or the highway, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They have a very controlling behavior, right? And they actually want things to be surrounded by their presence. Everything has to be very self-centered for them.
Right.
They want that they are the center of attention all the time. And I would also like to mention over here this, that it is not actually obvious, you know, out
Yes.
there. They're not actually out there perceived as if they are very narcissistic. They're very jolly, they're very confident,
Very charming,
and
yeah.
very charming. Yes,
Yes.
they have a very tempting sort of a personality. And what happens is that they are so capable and they have such careers that you cannot easily identify whether they have such personalities or not.
And that certainly happens to be our fault as well. Now, I think with this, you know, there's another question which needs to be posed, and that is that
Right.
do you think that they were raised like this, or do you think that it's a mental illness which unfortunately anybody can get or fall into?
Is it a disorder, or
Yeah.
is it a personality
Or
trait?
it's a self-acquired behavior?
Or is it something genetic, which
It
is
is
part of-
actually everything that you guys have just mentioned.
Okay.
It is amalgamation of everything that you're mentioning. Yes, you can have this surfaced on a very early age, right? It can be a part of your childhood. It depends what sort of upbringing you had, probably. Agar if your home environment was very toxic, right, and if you had a neglected sort of a childhood, these features can surface then. And besides this also, it also depends on what sort of environment you were given even as an adult.
Can it be treated, or this is something that it's a part of the nature and you can't
Because
change
if somebody
it,
with
right?
this with this sort of a problem becomes a parent, imagine what's going to happen to a child.
Yes,
Imagine
yes. Exactly.
if you were a child, what you can do to a parent. Imagine if you were a husband or a wife, what you can do to your partner. So, and what
Definitely.
can be the repercussions for living with such a person, and what sort of support system they might need from their peers.
I would say it's actually very difficult to have such a partner. Why? Because they cannot be easily exposed, because they are so good with their social interactions.
Careers are cheap, personality is amazing,
Exactly.
you know, everything's okay.
Exactly.
You know,
So
anybody would be
basically
like,
even-
अपनी बेटी की शादी तो इसी से कराऊंगी.
Exactly. They are actually a very tempting sort of a person, and you would want to get your daughter married to such an individual. And I also, like I said, that what happens is that the girl even will have probably issues proving the fact that there is something wrong with this person. Because only he
बेटे
shows
अच्छा
this
कमाता तो है,
personality.
इतना अच्छा है, good looking है, तुम्हें घुमाता है, पैसे देता है. I mean, that's it. That's the kind of
I don't
conversation
think
that we
so.
have.
We should talk in a gender terms,
Yes.
because narcissist can be a man and it
Obviously,
can be a
obviously.
woman too,
Definitely.
right? So you can have a
But-
narcissist wife, you can have a narcissist mother, you can have a narcissist friend out there, right?
I think
I
me
would
being a
also-
little biased today is because of the fact that we will find more examples in men, you know,
Yes,
of such
yes.
behaviors.
I'm actually mentioning probably more male such
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah, yeah,
Why?
yeah.
Because I've seen more male patients of such sort.
And do you
And it
think
is-
that the male dominant society kind of contributes
Exactly,
to it?
exactly, it does. So this is
Right.
why I'm actually maybe even more inclined towards mentioning male having such
Shukriya.
traits. Otherwise, and yes, I would second you on this, that I have seen a couple of mothers having these traits as well. And then they raise mamas boys who are very attached to them, and they would have this personality that they would not even let them have their own married life, and they would always be sort of helicopter parenting their child the whole time, because they would not want them to make their own choices, they would not want them to be independent. So I have seen such traits even in mothers a lot, especially in our society.
Exactly.
So it is very common these days, and
But
it actually
I think that the only problem
Right.
lies where now, for example, that
Right.
you've used this term as well, and I guess that, you know, a lot of people might have heard it, you know, mama's boy. Now imagine that, you
Oh,
know, if
yeah.
you're obedient to your wife, you know, you're wife's boy. If you're obedient to your mama's
Joru
boy.
ka ghulam, right?
You know,
Yeah.
so imagine that we keep on coining these terms. How dangerous can it be for anybody to live with a narcissistic person? That's it. You know, let's draw the line here.
And if you're stuck with that, so for example, if you have a narcissist spouse, right, so it's not easy for anyone to come out from the marriage, right? And especially in South Asian cultures, we have seen that honor is associated with the marriage, right? So what options do you have? So now that you know that your spouse has a narcissistic tendencies, or he has a she or he has a narcissistic personality disorder, and if it's not easy to leave that marriage, and if you have kids with that person, so what can you do? You know, what sort of...
How can you treat it?
Yeah.
okay, what you can do is you can draw some boundaries over here, so that you do not need to fix the other person who's a narcissist. what you need to do is probably protect your own mental health during this process.
How do you do that? Because they're very manipulative, very controlling.
Yes, so what you do is you do not try to tell them what to do or how to behave. What you do is you tell them that if they behave a certain way, these are the things they will have to face, or these are the consequences they will have to face. And you try to bring yourself out of that situation more rather than confronting them or trying to prove to others that they are having such behaviors with me. So that is a better approach in order to protect your own
and
self
how
and your
vulnerable
children.
that person can get to, unfortunately, going through mental stress, depression, anxiety for whoever's living with such a person.
A lot, actually.
Because you cannot get away from that as well. So how, for example, if somebody who's watching us today, we go out in 46 different countries, is able to figure out that whatever conversation we're having, that, my partner, unfortunately, or my parent, unfortunately, happens to, suffer from narcissistic personality. How should I make sure that my mental state stays positive, that I, am a good mother or father or brother or sister to my,
And do narcissists admit that they are narcissists in the first place? Because they believe that they're the best people out there, they're nicest people out there, they're empaths and whatnot. So
I would actually say narcissistic individual does not have insight, probably. That they've been practicing this. It has become such a deep embedded sort of a trait that they can't actually put it out there and be like, I am a narcissist. They don't believe that.
So it's a characteristic of their personality now.
Exactly. Now it is so normal for them to behave that way that you can't say that they actually believe there's a problem with them. Of course they don't. And that is why the other person suffering so much, because they do not accept the fact
they have
that
little empathy, they can't relate to the feelings.
Exactly. So the individual who's with such a person, what they can do is that
Ignore.
they can
Delete.
can actually
what if you say your mother or father? You can't do that, right?
They can actually create a social circle, a support system for themselves, where they can interact easily, people who can provide them a comfort, a safe space. And I would actually promote financial independence over here. I would say that they need to be financially independent so that they can actually have their own career or their own, like to protect your mental health, you need to have all the things available for your own self as well, where you do not need to look at that person or be with that person a lot. I would actually suggest that if it is causing a lot of depression and stress in your life, maybe leaving that person might be a better option.
Exactly. And I think I have another option as well. So imagine, maybe it's somebody, who we kind of figure it out. I don't know whether how good we are going to be to figure it out whether, somebody is narcissistic or not. But I think that there's always that one thing that, that anybody would love the most. Now imagine anybody with narcissistic personality can say that, I love my children a lot. Now imagine that you, God forbid, I'm not saying that I'm suggesting this, but if you are to kind of figure it out yourself, make sure that you threat them, by saying that I'm going to take this one thing that you love the most away, what will you do? And you will see them falling onto their knees as well. This is something that I might have witnessed myself, that, when people, because everybody will love somebody eventually, and when you talk about taking away their love, that's when they kneel down. But I don't know whether they will change their personality for the moment, for the timing, they might kind of come around as well. Now, very quickly, because with that, there are other traumatic syndromes attached to it as well. Now, imagine that if we are to talk about, if we do not treat this narcissistic behavior, how far can it go in a stretch that we see a person literally losing control?
Yes, it is a possibility, definitely. It depends if their narcissistic personality has been boosted by the individuals around them. If like he has a mother,
self-esteem being polished.
Exactly. So if there is somebody who is probably bringing that personality even more out, and with time it might happen that it starts increasing, those traits start to become like a major part of that person.
Mera Shahzada Puttar.
Yes.
Chaudhary aa gaya ji.
Oh, yes. So, yes.
I mean, it's a common norm over here. Yeah.
So they're going to become more egocentric, and they're going to become more rigid with time, and their behaviors are going to be more problematic with time. Maybe if somebody in their surrounding maybe gives them a reality check, or maybe makes them realize.
No, but we get to meet these people.
But how do you identify narcissism? So again, this term has been more commonly used, right? So there's lots of literature written on the psychotherapy. No, obviously, but do you believe that all people who have this tendency of controlling others, of manipulating others, are narcissists or not? So how, or is it a pattern that you identify within days, within months, or you can identify it within a day? So how do you go about identifying a narcissist?
I wouldn't say that you can identify it very early on.
Yes.
You probably will also fall into the trap of that this person is a very nice person and they're very, interactive and they're out there. So you might actually fall for them for the very reason.
True.
And that's why you might not be able to identify for probably a year or two, even being married to that person.
Right.
So I would not
It's
say
very
that
dangerous, yeah.
they will actually probably understand when they've been gaslighted, when they've been manipulated, when they've been told what to do, how to behave. These traits, when they start, and initially a woman or a man might think that these are, you know, love traits and they're not actually abuse. So, but if they've been manipulated, they've been gaslighted, controlled, that is when eventually slowly they will start to realize that this person has these
Exactly,
traits.
and these happen to be those triggers as well. Now imagine that you kind of asking, or you know, rather want them to do something, you know. So imagine they'll be like, for all of these questions that she's saying, you know, oh, I was just being possessive, you know, I didn't mean that, and you know, there's so many things that they'll go about. But if you are to, you know, kind of witness and see or meet these people, ladies and gentlemen, imagine it's your son's wedding or daughter's wedding, you go give your card to, you know, all of your relatives, all of a sudden on the wedding day you get a call. It can be from anybody. ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤੇ ਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਸ਼ਾਦੀ ਤੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਵਾਂਗੇ, you know, all of those people. If you're out there and if you're listening and if you've done it ever, you need to change yourself. I think that rather than people directing or people unfortunately wanting to get out of this relationship where you being present around them is causing them stress and anxiety, you need to have a resolve. You need to make sure that you reflect upon this, that God forbid, you know, if I'm doing this or not, because she said that, you know, that they won't have that insight in them. So please make sure that you kind of have a fair analysis with your own self, sit down with your own self and analyze. Well, are you controlling? Are you abusive? You know, are you making sure that you're going to take decisions for other people?
That's a very difficult thing for a narcissist to do, because they think that they are the best people out there. They are the nicest people out there, and that's a personality trait, because you cannot change your nature. You can, but it requires a lot of emotional work, which is very difficult. So now let's talk about narcissist recovery, right? So someone who has suffered from the narcissist abuse, especially as a child, right? If you have a narcissist parent, and I've seen that happening, and because they control your personality so much, they, I mean, totally break yourself. So how to reconnect back to yourself, and I mean, how to go about the recovery from the narcissist abuse?
All right, I would highly recommend going for therapy, of course, and taking sessions for yourself so that you can work on your stress, on your anxiety. And I do believe that their children will be impacted a lot as well. And they need to probably prioritize themselves and think about how they can probably recover from this whole situation. Maybe they need insight about what exactly gaslighting is, how manipulation works. So like, for example, gaslighting is when the other person sort of distorts your reality, and they try to make you think otherwise from whatever you've been experiencing. Like, for example, they would say that it's only you who has been thinking this didn't even happen actually. And then you start to, you know, sort of question your own thoughts and your own reality. So maybe having insight of what sort of traits that the other person has and how I can actually identify them in that person, and then start working on your own, you know, own mental health.
Better and wellness as well. But thank you so much, Ms. Surya, for being with us. Lovely to be in conversation with you. Really loved every bit of conversation that you spoke about, and I guess that it's going to be hopeful for other people. So please make sure that if there's somebody who's in their own world, you know, thinking that whatever I'm thinking is right, you probably need a rain check over here. So for everybody who's out there, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you look after yourselves. You know, these are our efforts, the efforts of Pakistan television over here, to make sure that every single day we speak about things which people usually don't, you know, so to kind of trigger that thought process which can bring about an impactful positive change. Until next time, look after yourselves. 1, 2, 3.
Good morning.
Yeah.